Hey everyone, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're starting off in Joplin, Missouri, and this is the garage apartment that Bonnie and Clyde stayed in here for 13 days, and it was a turning point in what happened to them. It's the first time that we catch a glimpse of what they looked like, because some police officers came out here and they thought that they were busting a bootleg operation, and what happened was they stumbled across Bonnie and Clyde, and they had just been on a run where they were scouting places to rob. It was not a bootleg operation at all. So what happened was they pulled the car into the garage, and at that time there were 5 police officers that showed up here, and one of the police officers went straight up and tried to close the garage door or keep it from being closed. At that time, Clyde pulled a shotgun out and shot the officer in the neck and shoulder area, and he instantly dropped dead. Now the police officers had kind of blocked this little drive here so that they couldn't escape, but there was a shootout, and up here in the upper windows, and it could have been on the side there, but I'm assuming it's probably there. It's the first time where you hear about Bonnie firing, and up in that upper part you had W.D. Jones, who was part of the gang, and Bonnie, they were firing at the officers. Another officer was shot, and he died later on that evening or night, and then they thought they hit another officer, but he basically stumbled backwards on his feet and fell down, and then he stayed down. At that point they dragged the bodies out of the way and then took the car and put it in neutral and then just kind of rolled it down. In the midst of all the chaos of the gunfire, Blanche Barrow, who was Buck Barrow's wife, had come out screaming with a little dog, and the officers that survived this situation had stated that they didn't know if she had been abducted by him or what. But she went off running down that way, and once they moved the officer's car and they got in their car and made their getaway, they got Blanche Barrow and picked her up and then left. They left in such a hurry though that Blanche Barrow's jewelry was left here inside, as well as a camera that had film on it, and the local newspaper developed that film, and on that film you get your first glimpses of what Bonnie and Clyde looked like. And there's a couple pictures that were made famous as they were published in the paper, and then put in papers all over the place. One of them is where Bonnie has her foot up on the bumper leaning over, kind of in an unladylike pose for the time period, and then she has a pistol that's on her hip and a cigar in her mouth where it appears that she's smoking a cigar. There's another photo where she's actually holding a shotgun or a rifle. I think it's a shotgun if I remember correctly, aimed right at Clyde, like she's gonna shoot him, and it's just kind of a little skit thing that they were doing is what it appears like. But from there they were absolutely made famous because it put faces and pictures with who they were. But here is a sign that's here documenting this account, and this house is on the National Register of Historic Places. A lot of history here, but I'm going to take you down in the Dallas, Texas area and show you a couple other little key places with the Bonnie and Clyde story, as well as a few graves of those that were involved in the Bonnie and Clyde story. So we're now at this cemetery here, and unfortunately the gates are locked. I've walked all the way around this and I don't want to climb the fence or anything. Just to give you a little history here, right there you'll see that sign. So this is the original cemetery that Bonnie Parker was buried in, and she was here until 1945 when her sister Billie Jean moved her to the cemetery that she's presently in. She still has an uncle in here, as well as her grandparents that reside in this cemetery. Fortunately, her grandparents reside right there. The grave on the left is her grandmother, Mary Jane Krause, and on the right is Frank Krause, and the other Krause that's there, I believe, is her uncle. This would have been from her mother's side, so luckily this is right by the fence here, and I could still lean over and take a picture of their graves. But Bonnie Parker would have been buried somewhere near here. Might have been a little bit over there, or to the side, or maybe just in front there. I'm not sure since she's now gone. But you can see a few indentions right here, and so I'm thinking that she could have been right here. So we are now at Crown Hill Memorial Park Cemetery, and you're gonna come to a fork in the road in which you'll see that mausoleum straight ahead. To the left of that, you'll see this row of hedges, and go just to the left of there, and you'll soon walk up on Bonnie Parker's grave. So just right there sits the grave of Bonnie Parker. And she was an avid lover of poems. She did poems quite often. She actually wanted to be an actor someday, and she was attracted to movies and things like that. One of the poems that she wrote, which is quite long, you can Google it if you want to, is called Trail's End. But one of the last sections of that poem reads this way: "Someday they'll go down together. They'll bury them side by side. To a few, it'll be grief. To the law, a relief. But it's death for Bonnie and Clyde." Bonnie wanted to be buried side by side with Clyde. That didn't happen. You can see the ground is well worn there. There's a lot of foot traffic here. And in fact, just since I've been here filming, there's been several people that have pulled up, got out of their car to take a look, so I've had to pause some of that. But as you take a closer look right here at her marker, you can see all kinds of things. There's live flowers, fake flowers. There's an angel there on the left, crystal. There's beer bottle tops, and of course all sorts of coins, pennies, quarters. And then up front you'll notice a cigarette and a Junior Ranger badge. It's quite interesting to see how many people still visit her grave. One of the things mentioned in Bonnie's poem is that she wanted to be buried next to Clyde. That didn't happen because of this lady right here, Emma Parker. Now this is Bonnie's mother, and she did not want her daughter to be buried next to Clyde. She stated to the press that Clyde had her for 2 years and nothing good came out of it, and so he couldn't have her for eternity. So Emma had her buried several miles away from where Clyde was buried. You'll notice the date there of 1944. That's the year that Emma Parker died. Now she was placed here by her other daughter, which is Billie Jean, at the same time. Right after that, in 1945, is when Bonnie Parker was placed here. Billie Jean decided to move her from the cemetery that she was in. Part of the reason is because of all the vandalism that was taking place, and her marker kept getting stolen, damaged, things like that. It's the original cemetery that she was in is in a quite shady area. I've also heard stories that there was a lot of water that would stand there, so there was a kind of a flooding problem. Regardless, Billie Jean moved Bonnie Parker here along with 2 of her children as well that were unmarked. So I believe from what I read that Billie Jean's children are somewhere at the foot area of Bonnie here. One of the things that you'll notice is that her marker is metal and it is cemented into the ground. Like I said, this marker has been stolen itself, and then that's when they decided to go ahead and cement this into the ground. One of the things that you'll also notice on this marker are all of these little indentions along through here. This is not from the caretakers of the cemetery. These are from people that have visited this particular grave and wanted to chip off pieces of this marker as a memento. So there's quite a bit of scratchings and stuff like that in this. It's sad that people do that, but they do. Since she's a famous outlaw and really part of the most famous outlaw gang ever, she gets a lot of foot traffic. You'll notice here these words were placed here. I believe it was from her mother Emma. As the flowers are all made sweeter by the sunshine and the dew, so this old world is made brighter by the lives of folks like you. Now she's buried here forever next to her mother, Emma. So we are now at the Western Heights Cemetery. If you look down at the bottom, you'll notice that there is a chain and lock on the gate there. And you could easily sneak through that gate, and I think a lot of people do. But there's actually a gate over there area, and it has no swing hinge gate or anything like that. It's just open, so you can come right in there and take a peek at who's in here, which is Clyde Barrow. If you're interested in some of the history here, they have this marker that's immediately to the left when you come in this main gate that has the chain on it. One of the things about this, you can always tell that you are in a well-visited cemetery when you see a trail that's worn in and sunken down into the path of the marker that lies straight ahead of us. Now, this is the burial location of Clyde Barrow and also his brother Marvin Barrow, who went by Buck. They're both buried here, and you can see that there's actually a marker right there. That marker used to sit on this base here, but it was stolen many times, so they decided to no longer have an upright marker and place that marker down and cement it into the ground so that nobody can steal it. You also notice that this area is well worn and there's no grass growing here, but they've placed a lot of pebbles right in through here to kind of keep you from wearing down the dirt. As you get up close, there's obviously a lot of flowers that have been placed there. Some other interesting mementos though are these shells. Here we have a 45 and a 9mm that have been placed right there. And then Clyde, of course, he was involved in the famous shootout that happened in Louisiana where the 6 officers waited down a road for a couple days as he was sort of tricked and shot. Interesting thing on this, Marvin was buried here first, of course, and their mother stated to Clyde that she didn't want to get a marker just yet until he passed because she knew that he would be next. Now whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. There's a lot of hearsay when it comes to these gang members. But one thing is for sure, it's that the words down here at the bottom, "gone but not forgotten," supposedly that was the words that were requested by Clyde himself, that he wanted on his headstone if he should pass, if he was killed. And that's exactly what his mother did. He's gonna live on forever. It's one of those stories that goes on in American folklore And it's told over and over again, and there's tons of documentaries, tons of movies, tons of stories. But he is right here, and you can tell that he's well visited, and he's not going to be forgotten anytime soon. As you look around here, you can see where some of the mementos have blown off. You can see a penny right there. I also see some more 9mm shells that are in the ground here. That is one, and that's one right there. That looks like a 45 actually. Lots of bullet casings there that are all over the ground, as well as coins that are here. And I'm not for sure. It looks like maybe there's a tiny bit of rock chipping. People come through here with a key or a screwdriver, and they're taking off bits and pieces of this memorial. Seems to kind of be a common thing among these old outlaws where people do that. Looking down through all these different shells here, here's a 7.62 by 39mm. This is what a SKS or a AK-47 would fire. There's a whole bunch of different shells all up and through this grass. Some of them are kind of thrown back up behind and around. You can see one right there, in fact. In this same little family plot area where Clyde and Bud are buried lies their parents, which are right here to the left of them if you're facing them. And they are right there. You can see there's quite a few flowers placed here as well. And just to the left of them is the baby brother, E.W. Barrow. You can see how they're arranged right there. So one other interesting fact about Clyde Barrow's burial here in this cemetery is that none of the Parker family members attended the funeral of Clyde. Emma Parker, who was Bonnie Parker's mother, said that she did not care to. But one other interesting fact is Clyde's parents, right there, attended Bonnie Parker's funeral. Clyde was buried on May 25th, and then Bonnie was the very next day on May 26th. The estimates of people attending this funeral range somewhere around 10,000 people. And it's hard to imagine 10,000 people crowded around in this little cemetery. But they did. And still, you can see this trail right there where thousands more people have come to pay their respect to this criminal. So this building right here was the Barrow family residence and Barrow Star Station. It's a service station from 1931 to 1940. And you can Google all sorts of pictures where it actually says Barrow along through here. There's been a whole lot of modifications on this, so it looks nothing like what it did back in the day. But the family residence part was right back there. And when Clyde got out of prison, this is where he resided and tried to get his life straight. But he soon went back to a life of crime. There's all sorts of private property no trespassing signs here. But this particular spot is also well visited. And you can see where people have tried to bust in there. And it's just a old service station that's been occupied as several different things. In this window you can see someone has actually etched the name in the dirt, Clyde Barrow, historical home, save me. And then on that window there, you can see where people have busted in there, and they've done it on those windows too, but the boards are covering the busted part now. Right across from this are some high-rise apartments. But as you look down through the street, you can see old buildings that would have been around the same time as Clyde was here. It's just a look here at the back porch, which is kind of on the side of this building. This road is super busy, so hopefully you were able to hear me there. If you'd like to visit this home, it's located on the corner of Borger Street and Singleton Boulevard. Singleton Boulevard used to be named Eagle Ford Road at the time when Clyde lived here, and this service station was in operation. So I'm now in Sparkman Hillcrest Cemetery, more specifically at Acacia Garden. And this is the location of the next person that we're looking for. So this is the final resting spot of Ted Hinton. And he's an important figure in the Bonnie and Clyde case. He was one of the two officers that was hired by the Dallas County Sheriff Smoot Schmidt. He was hired because he knew Bonnie personally. Ted used to go into a cafe where Bonnie worked. In fact, it's been said that he actually had a crush on her, but he was assigned to this case because he could positively identify her and really both of them. So one other interesting thing about him is with the sheriff, they tried to have a shootout with Bonnie and Clyde, and it was at that point that Ted realized that he was severely under-equipped as far as firepower. So what he did was he contacted a politician, and he was able to draw out a BAR, Browning automatic rifle, from a National Guard facility. And so that was the preferred weapon of Clyde, and at this point it made it to where Ted would have equal firepower, or at least a little bit more equal firepower to what Bonnie and Clyde had. So Ted was one of the 6 officers that hid out in Louisiana waiting for Bonnie and Clyde to come down this road. And at that point, he used his BAR and was one of the officers that fired many, many bullets into Bonnie and Clyde and their vehicle, ultimately killing them both. So he was also the person that filmed the aftermath right there with the vehicle and how many bullet holes there were. He had a 16mm camera that he was given, and it was this for the specific purpose of filming the Bonnie and Clyde vehicle or death. So that's his footage that you may see if you Google it and look it up online. One more interesting fact about Ted here: after he was involved with the shooting of Bonnie and Clyde, he maintained a positive relationship with both families and often looked out for their interests. So I am now inside the mausoleum, more specifically on the Adoration Hall or row. The biggest thing I can tell you is to look for this stained glass window right here. It's kind of a sunrise or sunset, and there's some ducks taken off. Each hall kind of has a different one. Just over here, there's another important figure in the Bonnie and Clyde story. Talking about James Decker. It says Sheriff of Dallas County. At the time, he was not the sheriff, but he was the one that had an endless pursuit on the Bonnie and Clyde gang, the Barrow gang. And he was made famous for apprehending Raymond Hamilton, a member of the Barrow gang. So one other interesting fact about him is when he did become sheriff, he was actually the sheriff of Dallas County when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Talk about living through history. So I'm now in Grove Hill Memorial Park Cemetery. The best I can tell you is look for this right here, and then make your way over here to section H of the IOOF. And this is who we're looking for right here. Blanche Frazier is the person that we were looking for, and she was married to Eddie Frazier. She married him in 1940, but Blanche had one more year of parole left to do when she married him. And the reason is she was taken under arrest just outside of Dexter, Iowa, and she was the wife of Buck Barrow, Marvin Barrow. She married Marvin, or Buck, in 1931. And then, of course, Buck died in 1933 when he was shot in the head. There was another shootout in which Blanche was there. The windows got shot out of the vehicle, and the glass entered her left eye, and it blinded her in that left eye for the rest of her life. But she had a deep love for Buck. It's been described as a love that was every bit as deep as what Bonnie's was for Clyde. And so Blanche has stated that she was happy that Bonnie and Clyde died at the same time so that one would not have to live with the grief of the other one being gone. But she absolutely had a deep love for Buck. And this is where she's buried, in section H. We are now in the Lawnview Gardens section. The best thing I can tell you is look at these old houses here, and you can see that old house right there. It's just kind of painted that seafoam green. Certainly stands out compared to the rest of the houses that are here. This is another member of the Barrow gang, one of the original ones, Ralph Foltz. Now Ralph is somebody that Clyde met in prison, and they kind of formed that original gang there. Later on, Ralph did get his life straight, became a Christian, changed his life. But that was another prisoner and another member of the Barrow gang. So one of the other people that's in this cemetery is Bob Alcorn. Now, he was one of the deputies that Smoot Schmidt hired to help track down Bonnie and Clyde, and they wanted whatever means possible to take place to make sure that they were brought to justice. So it was Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton that were from Dallas County, hired by Smoot Schmidt, that were deputies, and they were hot on the trail of Bonnie and Clyde. He's somewhere in this section, I believe. This is the Masonic Garden, and on Find a Grave, Alcorn's parents are listed in the Masonic section. So I do believe it is this section that he's in. I can't find him though, and there's a ton of leaves, and this is a massive cemetery, but I think maybe the leaves are covering up his grave. So if you get the chance and you're able to look around out here and you find where he's at, or if you ask the office, leave a comment below and let me know. It's Sunday and the office is closed, or otherwise I would have went that route. Now in downtown Dallas, and this is the Bello Mansion. This mansion was transformed into a makeshift funeral home, I guess you could say, where Clyde Barrow's body was on public viewing here. You can see some videos of it, but there were some 20,000 people that filed their way through that mansion just to get a look at the famous outlaw's body. And of course there was tons of security and police here to try to prevent any kind of theft or damage or anything like that to the bodies. It's a big thing to provide security for some outlaws that became famous and beloved by many people in America.